Way of I wanted to welcome everybody on behalf of Jolyon Ralph and myself, who have been putting on this program since November 2020. And it's been a very interesting experience as we've grown and changed. This is the first program, the second program actually we've done that involves synthetics. I'm sorry, that's not involving synthetics. Forgive me. We will be doing the second program on synthetics that we've ever done in November, because I wanted to give you a heads up on that. Where it's going to be an exciting program. Actually, we have two expert gemologists who will be presenting on synthetic diamonds, and then in addition to that, we'll be calling back our friend Arya Akavan, who's a synthetics gem expert guru, I'd almost call him, from Ontario, Canada, and he will be talking about the synthetic diamond simulants that are out there and have been out there for over the years. So I think, especially with the very strong incursions that synthetic diamonds are making into the market these days, it will be a meeting well worth setting aside the time to join us. So when I send you out your invitations, will be first come, first serve, because I suspect we might reach our limit on that program. I hope anyway. Today's program is a little different. I'll be presenting to you, and what I'm sharing with you will be the program that I presented last weekend at a very excellent conference that was put on by the Canadian Gemological Association in beautiful Vancouver, right on the waterfront. And I would tell you that the speakers were all amazing and excellent, but that would sound egotistical since I was one of those speakers. But all the other speakers were brilliant and excellent. So I'd like to say, yeah, it was a program well worth attending, and I'm glad and honored that I was included in the invitations to speak. But what I'm going to do today is give you a slight overview of the evolution of a rare mineral collector, i.e. myself, and then go into a little bit about history and about the options and some of the stones that are out there. We're not going to be able to touch on all of them because there are so many. But I wanted just to sort of share with you a different view of different gems, something completely different from what you may be used to normally thinking and selling, thinking about and using and selling, i.e. the traditional gems, ruby, sapphire, emerald, diamond, all the ones we make our money on for the most part. But I want to make a case, and you'll see later on what I'm talking about, for expanding your view of what is precious and how that might actually profit you. So I'm going to start. And for those who have come later, I'm sorry that you'll be missing little bits and pieces, but we're going to begin. And what I want to share with you today is a result of the fact that I originally was a mineral collector. I ended up becoming a collector of rare and exotic minerals. And of course, at the same time, since I was quite young, I was interested in gems as well. And this evolved along a separate pathway. And we'll talk about how that happened. And then we'll look at some of those gems that I'm referring to, which I think may shock and surprise you at how amazing they are looking and how gorgeous they are as potential things to put in jewelry to sell to your clients. And also, I would add that it's something, if you're an appraiser, it's something to have in your back pocket, because there are going to be, I think there's going to be an increasing number of people that are going to be searching out valuations and estimations of the value and quality of some of these rare and exotic gems as they become more present in our jewelry world. Just to start things off, when I was 9 years old, I got a mineral set at Christmas from my parents. And at that point, I started collecting rocks. At 16, I got St. Cancus's Gem Cutting, which is a bit of a book for when you're that young. And I taught myself from that book how to cut gems on my little 10-inch B&I gem maker. But the same year was a year of blossoming for me in terms of what I knew and the skills that I had, because I also took an extensive apprenticeship in silversmithing and started my FGA course with the PFGA, which is what they called it in those days. And my first cut stone was not an exotic one. It was actually a heart, and I actually did quite a few hearts over time. My first ones were for my mom. And at the time, I was quite intrigued at being in something of a romantic, because the name for this variety of rutilated quartz was flèche d'amour, or arrows of love. And it had thin, silky rutile fibers in it, and it had a scintillation across those fibers that was really quite captivating, and a beautiful looking thing when it was cut properly, when that final polish came up. Whoops, try that again. So my first attempt at cutting something other than might be considered a rockhound kind of stone was rhodochrosite, which is a pretty soft stone, and it's kind of hard when you're first learning to cut to get a good polish. And that's lesson one about soft mineral gems, is they are a different kind of challenge to achieve a polish, because you have to be so very careful to get every possible scratch out, as you do with every cut stone, but they're so easy to miss and so easy to get on soft stones. And I did it on a beautiful, from a beautiful slab of very high quality rhodochrosite, a mineral of, I think, quite great beauty. But I made a step a few years later by commissioning a rare cut stone. I think I was 19 at the time. And the first rare cut stone that I had cut was the one pictured, which is a fluorite that I found in the Dundas Quarry near Hamilton, Ontario. And I got one of the old time cutters that I met at the show in Scarborough, who was demonstrating cutting there, Rudy Wobido. And he cut a 2.11 carat, almost flawless stone. And so it began the process of discovery and fascination with a different and new kind of precious. These are stones, in my estimation, that I think eventually may challenge what we consider as precious stones. So in the past, I'm making this sort of nod of the head to the fact that things might be changing. Precious stones, by definition, when I started learning about precious stones, were revered in tradition and myth. And an awful lot of books were written on the myths surrounding precious stones and the magical powers therein. And it was clear that precious stones, right back into the earliest recorded history and some of the non-recorded history, were stones that were used to awe and impress those who were less fortunate or less wealthy than you. And of course, because they were uncommon, people looked upon them with some kind of superstition and awe. And that was a way of actually impressing people of your status in society. You prominently displayed cut, polished stones. They were also valued because they were beautiful and they were colorful. And precious stones, definitely, if you wanted to have some kind of a quality, they had to be tough and durable, as in diamonds and sapphires and so on, because they had to last and be worn on a daily basis. And again, and this is what adds the greatest value, I think, over time, is the relative unavailability or limited availability to the truly great of the precious stones, the 5+ pigeon blood red rubies and so on. So they were valued for their rarity. And I'm saying that past tense with tongue in cheek. So I'm wanting to challenge today traditionally accepted gems, such as the sapphires that I'm blotting out here with this great big X. And I like to believe that there's a possibility that with open minds, we can establish new traditions and broaden the scope of what we might be calling precious gems. Now, just to give us a slight historical example here, and I think it's a very important one, because if I could see a show of hands, which I can't, but just in your minds, if you'll put up your hand, if you have sold or handled a tanzanite, or have one in your stock, or are presently selling them in your store, or at least have evaluated tanzanites in terms of value. Because before 1967, tanzanite was not a known item. It wasn't an entity that anybody knew about. And it was discovered by Maasai cattle herders near Marilani, Zaire, now called DR Congo, I believe. No, I'm sorry. Try that again. Tanzanite. And was brought to the attention of local experts who puzzled over this stone. They did know that they had an idea that it was related to zoisite, a mineral they knew about, but it wasn't the right color. And it was an exotic, something special and different. So the local educated person that saw and got a hold of these materials from Maasai herders sent it off to the place they thought would have a better chance of telling them what it was, Saks Fifth Avenue in New York, to try and identify it. And Saks, of course, did not know what it was and took it down the street to the local GIA office. And of course, Tiffany and Company were just down the street as well. And they heard about it and wanted to see this and realized, whoo, this unknown material that had never been seen before had great potential. It had great color, and color was important if you want to sell something that's new and special. And they launched a campaign to popularize it in 1968. And from that point on, they made great efforts to control the mining, and for that matter, control the marketing for decades. And that has slipped away from their control over the years. But from obscurity to becoming a household word, it's only taken 54 years. And compare that to the centuries, and I'd say even millennia, of acceptance for all the other more commonly known precious gems that we deal with on a daily basis in the business of making jewelry and appraising it. So this was the first exotic and rare gem to invade the market. And I believe, and I say this with some confidence, that in the near future, there are going to be other unique and rare exotics, mineral gems that could also be a tanzanite for the gem world. Color and beauty. Well, these are two of the characteristics of exotic rare gems as well. And they can be just as beautiful as traditional precious gems. And here we have an example that looks almost like a pigeon blood red ruby, but it isn't. It's a rhodonite, which is a manganese mineral from Australia. And its hardness is hard enough to be considered to be worn worn in jewelry and to be set. And this particular one is 10.1 carats. It's from the Royal Ontario Museum collection. And I did some research on the appraisal values on these, because they are quite rare, are about $1,000 to $10,000 per carat to get a nice clean one. So, and there's also rhodonites that come out of Lafayette in Brazil as well, which are of equal quality and color. In fact, even nicer red than the ones from Australia, in my opinion. So toughness and durability obviously is going to be important, and something that's going to be worn on a daily basis. But not even all precious stones have that quality. I mean, look at amber, look at pearls, the organic gems, and opal for that matter. They're not. They have all the other characteristics of rarity and color and beauty, but they definitely are not tough, and they definitely aren't durable. But the range in hardness, the stones that are rare and exotic mineral gems, the ones I'm talking about today, from hardness 2, which is definitely not something you'd have more than in a collection, to hardness 7.5 in hardness. And that's definitely a hardness that can easily be worn in jewelry. The trouble with most of the really rare mineral gems is that they're soft and easily broken. And so we have to consider, if we're going to consider a future for any of these gems to be worn in jewelry, only those that are in the 5 to 7.5 range of hardness. An example of a stone that's quite rare but is durable is the mineral cornerupine. And this, I apologize for the quality of the picture, but I stole it from the website of Coast to Coast Rare Stones. And this is from Tanzania. And again, a good hardness, 6 to 7. And whenever I can, I throw an idea of the price, because it gives you an idea that these stones are not cheap, and therefore can hold value in terms of things that you might want to include in a piece of jewelry that would make money in the regular jewelry business. So rarity is, I think, one of the most important characteristics of most of the gems. It adds the greatest amount of value in the precious gem world. So what could cause rarity, not only in the standard precious gems, but also and particularly in the gems that I like and specialize, which the rare mineral gems. And I say that with tongue in cheek, because everything except for the organic gems are mineral gems. They all come from minerals. So this is just the minerals that are much rarer in terms of either their existence as a mineral or as their existence as a gemmy mineral that might possibly be cut. So of course, if we look at value initially, you have to consider the rarity of the mineral itself. And having been to the mining locations in Mogok, I was clearly impressed by how uncommon the good quality spinels and rubies and other precious stones of that area really were in the matrix mining as well as in the alluvial mining there. And I think that's pretty well common in all the major gem mining worlds, is that the good stones are actually quite rare within the population of the crystals that are and fragments of mineral crystals that are being found. And of course, again, as there's mentioned, finding a piece of mineral gem that is clean enough to cut is also quite rare. And add to that the difficulty of cutting, which is actually the case for a great number of the gems that I like to collect and I'm trying to promote here. So softness, easy cleavage, and general fragility is a problem with the cutting of these stones. And this is why it's difficult to find cutters who have the skill set and the patience and the equipment to successfully cut these gems. And of course, there is the added stress factor because of the extreme rarity of the material that we're dealing with. And of course, we have issues around the world of having sources that have been around for a long time. And one of those, of course, clearly would be the blue Kashmir location for blue sapphires has sort of been unavailable for decades now. And so the Kashmiri color and light within the stone of a perfect Kashmiri blue sapphire is now become a quality almost rather than a location for that particular stone. And the loss of source due to natural disasters, another example in the Mogok area, and this is very crucial to the Orient, who love jade, is that the primary location for some of the best of the Burmese jadeites was and still is somewhat buried, I think, as a result of a massive landslide, which killed some miners and made it almost impossible and definitely too dangerous. I think even to this day, for people to go back and keep on mining in that location that's been mined for centuries. So these things do happen. And of course, I mentioned earlier about tanzanite, but if you take a look at what's going on there, the government has built a wall, a very high wall around the primary mining area for tanzanites so that they control the output of the mines. And yet magically, we all seem to get tanzanite coming out. And and they don't want tanzanite leaving the country out of the control of the walled area unless it's been processed and cut. And yet we still see all kinds of it coming from Kenya because the buyers go into Tanzania, buy the stones, and then pay someone half of what they're going to be paid for getting the stones out of the country, and half again upon picking them up outside of the boundaries of the country. So this is where a certain level of deviousness and skill at manipulation of the rules, we can get stones out of countries that have limited source. And Madagascar is another one of these places which is very difficult to get stones out of, although yet we still keep on seeing great stones coming out of Madagascar. So with difficulty comes ingenuity. And of course, I just mentioned that because even in Mogok, there's a bit of, you have to have grandfathered a license for exportation of the gem minerals out of Mogok to be continuously capable of accessing the gem materials that are there. So we look upon Mogok materials and they're obviously beautiful material, but it's also very difficult to get them out. And there's a limitation on who can do that. Now, this one I've run into where one person found a location, it's a great location, it's a super rare mineral, and they never told anybody for fear of someone stealing all the stuff they had. And so as a result, when that person passes, we no longer have access to the location or particularly that mineral. So we have to go hopefully into old collections and other locations, other people and other sources to try and back source the materials that we're looking for. So that actually is a threat to access. And then again, we have mining companies who are get sick and tired of their miners taking time off work to go and sneak specimens out of the mine so we and the rest of the world can have access. And this is happening a lot in China right now, where the government is cracking down on artisanal mining, which is the source of an awful lot of beautiful and amazing specimens that are coming out of China. And this has happened in a great number of places as well, where and of course the diamond mining companies have certainly perfected the methodology of limiting the miners' access to the actual mineral that they're mining, and that way they've kept some pretty massive capability of controlling the stealing of and removing of minerals from the mine. But this is still a problem that we have to deal with. And of course, one of the biggest limitations in the end will be cost. And this is something that will limit our ability to sell and also sometimes to buy. So I was going to throw some of these rare mineral gems at you to share with you. Now, anybody who's in the mineral world, and some who are not, will know the mineral kyanite as a somewhat fibrous, long crystal that has a beautiful blue color, but very rarely is transparent, and at best is translucent. And yet, here we have a stone that's faceted of kyanite, and this is a perfect hardness for cutting, although its hardness differs in each direction in relationship to the c-axis of the crystal. And these crystals were found in a location in Nepal, and I was told by someone that because of the governmental restrictions on exportation, there isn't an awful lot of faceted kyanite out there for us to get. But there are literally storerooms full of facetable material being held on to and waiting for the change in regulations for exportation of the stone. So I'm looking forward to that, because I think this rivals some of the best of the sapphires, not necessarily in clarity, but definitely in color, and I really like it. Now, anybody who's had any contact with rare mineral collectors know that one of the glory holes for a wide variety of rare minerals in the world was Mont Saint-Hilaire in Quebec, and the location is, I believe, still pretty well. I think it's owned, or part of it's still owned, by the University of Montreal, and I think they allow one collecting trip a year to the Montreal Mineral Club. So those people who want to still go and collect there and try their chances and luck at finding some rare minerals get one chance a year, as far as I understand it, to still go in and collect. And amongst the minerals that were found there, catapleite was generally in microscopic sizes and generally fairly thin and tiny. So there were a few exceptions, and apparently Brad Wilson, who's a member of the Canadian Gemological Association and has his own company, Alpine Gems, is a sort of a wild man collector who goes out all across the wild places, particularly in Canada, to go to try and find new locations for gem materials. And he cut this, and I think he accessed it from someone else. I don't actually think he collected this himself, but a nice example of a very rare mineral, and whose hardness is within the range, but whose accessibility and availability is extremely tiny. Now, I used to have a lot of people make fun of this mineral because when you say it without seeing it written, it sounds like something you have when you're hungry. But apatite is clearly an interesting gem mineral, and it is rare to find it clean enough to facet. And I have a specimen in my collection that was cut from, I don't know if I've got it in these pictures, but it was cut from some material that was being mined in Ontario at Tory Hill, and they gave it a commercial name of trilliumite. And in this case, this is from the Yukon, and I think it's a location that was up a pretty harsh bit of mountain climbing to get to. And I'm pretty sure that this was mined by Brad, cut by Brad, and he also photographed it. And I've got some of this in my collection as well. And it's a very pretty stone, and it has enough of a hardness. Again, it's one of those situations where there aren't a lot of really clean apatites, at least in Canada, but there are some in other parts of the world, like Mexico and Europe, and also I believe I've seen some really nice ones from Pakistan. So, but anyway, Definitely one of the actually one of the minerals in the hardness set, the Girls Can Flirt and hardness 5, and definitely a gem that if you cut it right and you get a clean enough piece, it has great brilliance. Now this is a stone that up until very recently was extremely hard to get, and all the initial stones were given the trade name zoltanite. And it's a mineral, a fairly rare mineral in terms of being clear and cuttable, called diaspora. And the best and biggest ones in the world were from Turkey. And this particular one was cut by Stephen Kotlowski, who actually challenged the HETA with his cutting skills. And I believe he was the first one to receive master cutter designation. And then with his increased in skill sets, and the quality of cutting, with every meat being perfect and all the facets being absolutely perfectly done, they had to give him a higher status of grandmaster cutter. And until someone needs to be muted, please mute, please mute. Thank you. Sorry. And so this was one of the ones he cut, and it's at the time was the most perfectly cut one that he had kept back for himself in his own estate. And this stone is valued somewhere around 36,000 as a stone. So it's these stones can and will have high value. And the reason this stone has interest as a gem, not only because of hardness, but it also changes color in different lights, different light sources. And when you cut it at right angles to the C-axis, because these crystals tend to be long and narrow, and the tendency amongst most of the native cutters and local cutters for years had been to cut it in the most economical fashion, which is along the C-axis, and that gave the least amount of waste. But with this stone, to get the maximum optical effects out of it, you had to cut it at right angles to the C-axis. So you had to find a big and stubby crystal, which are quite rare, and find it also big, stubby, and clean, to be able to actually achieve the beauty that you see in this stone in terms of all the color refraction that it's capable of. So a stone that has value intrinsic in its rarity and its color and its optical characteristics. Please mute. Okay, so this particular stone, I actually have a similar one, not quite as big, but 29 carats is a pretty big stone for andesite. Andesite is a lead ore, and it comes from the mining areas in Morocco at Tuisi. And it's not usable as a gemstone, but it certainly is a beautiful addition to any collection because it has extremely high refraction, which is typical of the lead-based gem minerals. And an example you can always see is if you have cut leaded crystal, the addition of lead to glass gave it a much higher refractive index. And when they faceted the glass, that and in terms of chandeliers or glassware, it always refracted the light magnificently. And so also is the characteristic of a properly cut andesite. And very hard to get a good one of this size. This is an amazing stone. Now, scapolite is of the feldspar family, and this is a particularly large one that I got from a mineral dealer from Tanzania, and it was cut by Nancy Attaway, who actually does a lot of recutting of stones for the Smithsonian, and this was cut from a fairly large crystal, and it's not perfectly clean, but it's certainly got great color, and it's a good size. And this is one of those ones that I would say is a good candidate for being one of those tanzanite type gems that we could throw out there to our clientele as something that would look beautiful in jewelry and is actually accessible, because there are some reserves of this particular gem material in tanzanite in Tanzania, that more so than a lot of the other rare gem minerals that I've shown you. So this is the one I think one of the ones that I think has potential. This one stunned me when I saw the picture, because I was aware that the Mfwati mine in DR Congo had some very large crystals of and very thick crystals of wolfenite, which is exceedingly rare in the world of minerals because most wolfenites are thin blades and therefore not cuttable. And so kudos to Brad, not only for cutting a very brittle and difficult stone, but bringing the kind of life that he brought into the stone that he did. And again, this one's value is primarily because of its color and its rarity, because in terms of durability, not something you want to wear in a ring. Now, this is something that has very limited access as well, because these materials are not, as far as I know, coming out of the Jeffrey mine anymore because it's been closed for quite a few years. But I do hear that people have still been making field trips in and occasionally open up or break away a shelf and find some really nice crystals of Vesuvianite there. And the other name for this is idocrase. So this is a gem that is out there that we've heard about in the gem world. But these particularly amazing colors that came out of the Jeffrey mine were, I think, spectacular. And you can see how rare and unusual the violet purple ones was, because they only got about a half a carat stone out of that. And none of these stones are really large. And it's very hard to find clean pieces of the Vesuvianites from Jeffrey. But this is a Canadian gem. And I think that Brad did a really good job on these stones. And I would be proud to wear any one of these in a stick pin, an earring, or a ring, because they're hard enough and they certainly are lively enough and pretty enough. Again, this is one of those stones that is a lead-based mineral, phosgenite, and I've been trying for years to get my piece of phosgenite faceted, and they've had no success with 3 different cutters so far. Maybe I should talk to Brad with what I've got left and see if he can somehow meet the challenge. I have no idea whether he would or not, but he obviously met and exceeded the challenge with cutting this one, hardness 3, very difficult to cut, will not allow any transference of heat. So friction is a huge issue, which means polishing is a problem on these stones, and they break and they split and they do awful things so easily. So they're a cursed stone for the cutter, but a magnificent stone for the collector. And unfortunately, that's something we could set and wear in jewelry, but certainly something that is exceedingly pleasurable to look at because they refract light in amazing ways. And the trouble is, with a static picture like this, you cannot catch the refraction that you would catch in a movie or a moving picture. And I'm going to try over the next year to try and get some pictures of these types of stones in mini movies so we can really appreciate them rather than seeing static shots, because it's kind of hard to get the refraction coming from all the angles that this stone puts out. And tremolite, to me, for the most part, is sort of a fibrousy stone that oftentimes gives you prickles in your fingers when you're collecting it. Although sometimes you get solid pieces, and I have not seen ever a faceted one before. And here's one in the cutting hardness range that's useful, but definitely not the cleanest stone in the world, but definitely very rare. And I'm quite impressed with this one that Brad has cut. Now, I was very lucky this year to get a 2.24 carat cut cassiterite from China that's at least as clear and bright as this one. And you just get hints of the refraction in this one because cassiterite is a tin of ore. And normally it's called wood tin. And because it's actually sort of a yellowish brown opaque ore that's a primary ore for the element tin, and is a big mining ore around the world. And occasionally in Australia and in South America and now in China, we're getting cuttable cassiterites, and Bolivia, cuttable cassiterites that are mostly in the yellow to brown and amber ranges, because but they're never as bright and clear as these clear ones. So as a rare gem, I don't know how much in the way of material there is in China that's colorless, but of the cassiterites that are out there, I think this is one of the most beautiful ones. Even though it has no color, it's got great refraction. And again, it's the right hardness. So there are sources in South America and in Australia where you can get cuttable cassiterites, not clear, colorless ones, but definitely clear enough to cut. And those sources, although somewhat limited, and relatively rare are still there. There are reserves. So this is another stone that I think might be a candidate to be included in jewelry, in the precious jewelries of the future. Now the diopsides I collected in Bancroft didn't look anything like this, because most diopsides are sort of pale tan, not very particularly or clear or attractive. But here we have a Canadian example that Brad's cut from Kaywood, Quebec. It's almost 7 carats and clearly in the hardness range. So I don't know how much availability there is of these clear ones from Kaywood. I've heard of them. I've never been able to get one before, so I admire Brad. He sourced it and cut it. I'm hoping I can get one of these for my collection. And I think this is another one of these candidates that's hard enough and definitely shiny and bright enough and refracts enough, I think, to be a stone that we could include in jewelry. Now, this one I just got this year, and there are only 5 known cut stones of brookite that I'm aware of in the world. And they came through one dealer that I was so happy to see in the Denver show this year, so I could acquire the best one in the world. This one's only 1.18 carats. And here's another one of these stones that every brookite I've ever seen, and good brookites only became available about 10 or 15 years ago. They were available in much smaller crystals, and they were all blades and all thin, and none of them were particularly exciting looking, and very few of them were translucent or even transparent. And here's an example of one that was cut and polished, and it's got, when the light comes through it, it's a pretty nice looking little stone. But again, this is impossibly rare, and as I said, this is the best one in the world. And again, here's another one of those stones that is rare, but rare partly because the number of occurrences of it that are clean enough to cut are limited to one location in the world, in Greenland, and the Danish government as well as the Greenland government limit access to collecting and mining on the continent of Greenland. And this is a very highly fluorescent mineral, and was originally collected as a very brilliantly fluorescent mineral. But people noted that amongst the specimens they found, occasionally there were small crystals that were clear. And so here Brad has taken advantage of that. He's got a sphere, which I suspect is probably about 3 or 4 carats. And then he's got a stone that's fairly transparent, but only half a carat or thereabouts. And that's extremely rare. And I would love to have one of these in my collection. I'd like to. I actually have only one small tight crystal, so also very hard to find. So these are things that are nice to know about, but definitely almost impossible to get. But here's one of those candidates that I think has a good chance. We, in the mining areas in Colorado, they pull up the minings on the mountain miners down there pull out phenicites on a fairly regular basis. And when cut, phenakite can be quite attractive. When they first come out, they have a color, but once they get out in the air and the light, they fade to colorless. And that's okay, because when they're cut properly, they can be quite attractive. And Madagascar, as I mentioned earlier, although it has some political issues surrounding the exportation and acquisition of gem materials, there's some very fine things coming out. And as phenakites go, that's a giant piece of rough on the left, 2,000 plus carats, almost a pound of gem quality material. And from that came 204 carat stone, which is really quite impressive. So obviously phenakite's relatively dense, has the perfect hardness, clarity, and brilliance to be a good stone to be worn in pendants and rings. So I'm saying there's another candidate there for the possibility of becoming something we can use in the gem trade. Now, sphalerite is one of the common minerals, one of the most common ore minerals in the world, and it's found in almost every country in the world. It's often found in what they call Mississippian mineral depositions, which are basically similar to the deposition in the tri-state area in the United States, where you have sphalerite and calcites and other minerals in that assemblage, and fluorites. And you see most of the time sphalerite is called zinc blende, and usually it's dark and really brooding, non-transparent, awful looking stuff, and is used as an ore. But occasionally, such as in Bulgaria and in Spain, and very rarely in Mount St. Hilaire, we get sphalerite that are clean enough to cut. And I've actually seen some sphalerites that were collected in Ontario that have been faceted, and they're small, but they're very attractive. They are sort of a honey to orange color. So green, yellow, white, and reddish. You'll see actually a sphalerite I have, I believe, in a future picture. But this one was from the very amazing location, which is Mount St. Hilaire. Sphalerites there were in this kind of quality and clarity were very rare. And you can just see hints of how high the refractive index of this stone is by the refraction that's popping up in the facets there. And here's another one of those. Powellite is a common mineral in India, but very rarely is it clean enough to facet. And it's certainly a challenge for anybody who wants to. So here's one that's almost 2 carats, but not really in the range of something you'd want to wear, but certainly one you'd want to have in your collection because of its rarity and its clarity. And I'm not sure whether the decimal plate's in the wrong place on this on the credits that I got from Brad on this. My thinking that it was possibly 35.4 carats, but there were some very large dolomites that came out of Brumado, so it's possible it's 354 carats. And this is the same hardness as calcite, so it's not really a wearable stone, but it can be very attractive. And you can see hints of the refraction in a well-cut stone on the bottom facets and side facets of this really well-cut dolomite that Brad has done. And the only locations that are known of facetable quality dolomite in the world were Brumado in Brazil, also in Spain. Gunnar Faber, who's a rare mineral collector, saw clear crystals lying in the sand in a part of the desert he was collecting in the Sahara. And of course, the location I was working with the miners in, which is in Mount Brusiloff in British Columbia. And the British Columbia location is the only, that mineralization in that area is the only location that I'm aware of for cuttable pieces of facetable pieces of dolomite. And Brad cut one for me from that location that was 39 carats. And I'll show you in a minute one that was cut by a cutter in the States. That was the only colored one that I got. It was slightly yellow. All the other ones are water clear. And it was 40 carats, and we'll see that in a minute. And also extremely good in real life, very, very high refraction. Now, this may not look inviting because the lighting is not coming from behind, but this is a fairly large crystal, 615 carat piece of dolomite that has a clear enough area in it to probably cut a 20 carat dolomite out of it. But I decided it was more valuable as a crystal to show the clarity and the luster that can be achieved. Now, when you look at the list of the most rare stones in the world, one of those top 10 stones, generally speaking, if it's done correctly, is Yeramayevite. And I'm not sure if I'm even pronouncing it correctly. I always take a chance on that one. And this, by the nature of this stone, there aren't very many large ones. It's fairly skinny, not very big crystals, and they're very uncommon. And it's in the range of color and hardness to be an attractive gemstone when worn, but I wouldn't want to wear this one because it's so exceedingly rare and very expensive to acquire. And I think that this one is really nicely cut, showing the colors that Brad did. Now I threw this one in there because to my mind, Sphene may be the highest candidate of all that I've seen out there in the exotic mineral world to be a very exciting stone to be putting in jewelry. It has extremely high refraction, and these stones from these sphenes that coming out of Madagascar are generally green background with yellow hints and a high degree of refraction. And this stone I pulled from the net was on sale by the First Dibs sales company, and they wanted over 10 grand for this 14.4 carat stone. So it's up there. It's in the range of stones that have high value and that clearly are something would be a good profit center for someone who wanted to dabble in the rare minerals, rare and exotic minerals, gems. Now, I was at a show for the Northwest chapter of Friends of Mineralogy about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And there was a guy wandering around pulling stuff out of his pockets. He didn't have a sales booth, and out came these faceted calcites. Well, at that time, I'd never seen a faceted calcite before, and I didn't see what point they would be, because calcite, although it was used as in submarines in their periscopes as part of the periscope optics, had a problem in terms of double refraction. So when you look through, it doubled in the back. And calcite's been used in other lenses and lens systems as well. And they make use of this double refraction property. But when you do it as a gem, it makes everything through it look fuzzy. But when the stone has a twinning plane in the middle of it, all of a sudden you see incredible refraction. And to the uninitiated that I've shown this stone to, they'll say, wow, that's a big diamond at 69 carats. And you got to consider calcite is a very, very low specific gravity. So to be 69 carats, it's a pretty sizable stone. And I'm quite proud that I acquired this one years ago, because I've never been able to afford one since. And sometimes life profits the prepared. And I was visiting Rod and Helen Tyson in their Rod Tyson's Fine Minerals shop in Edmonton many moons ago. And at that point, to my good fortune, they decided to stop selling cut stones. And so I was able to purchase from them a number of large, beautiful stones of rare minerals. And this is a different sphalerite. And this is one of the ones from Santander, Spain, that are almost impossible to get these days. And you can see just a hint of the high level refraction that this zinc sulfide stone has. Simple formula. I apologize for the little bits of lint that got on the picture. I'm not a perfect photographer, but I hope I captured some of the beauty of this stone. Not a practical stone, but a heck of a big one as they go, and a really beautiful one. And here again is an example of people who are cutters showing off their skill sets. I have one very rare form of salt that came from the States in the potash lakes and beds down in the southern United States. But this one was from New Mexico. And to facet a water-soluble stone is a challenge. And I believe they have to use some kind of oil rather than any kind of water as a lubricant when cutting them. And the other challenge, whenever someone's trying to cut a really soft stone, and this one's soft enough that you should be able to scratch it with your fingernail, is made out of the salt, the same stuff that you shake on your food, halite. And this is, I think, from the blue halite we're seeing at high prices in the mineral world. And someone took it upon themselves to facet it from the collection of the Museum of Natural History, London. And I thank Robin for sharing some of these pictures from her museum in London, because I wouldn't have seen that picture and that mineral had I not been lucky enough to have her share some pictures for our talk. And here's another one. Witherite is not a common mineral, and it's this one happens to be from England. I have a specimen of it from the States, and I'd never actually considered it to be a gemstone. And so this is the first time I've seen a cut example of it. Not a practical gem, but certainly a cool one to have in your collection because it's quite rare. And when I was taking my FGA, one of the stones that was in the books at the time that had been discovered by accident, in amongst other stones, was synhalite that was named because it was found in Sri Lanka, and the Sinhalese were the Sinhalese people there were the root name. I think they gave the stone. It was discovered, I think, by a gemologist in Sri Lanka as well, as part of it. No, it was someone visiting who found something different in the packet of stones and had it tested and discovered a new mineral, a new gem mineral, synhalite. Its hardness is adequate, its clarity is adequate, and there are, now that people know what to look for, there are some reserves of this stone, and it can be bought. And not all of them are this kind of color. Some of them are slightly more attractive in color, but this one again is from the collection at the Museum of Natural History. And I would say this is definitely a candidate. And also, you saw the scapolite that I showed you earlier that came from Tanzania that had a lot of orangey yellow color to it. Here's one that's colorless that has a lot of light to it. And this is a very large stone, 245.6 carats. And again, this is a stone that's in the hardness range that would be usable in jewelry. Although I don't know, I think I'd get a sore neck if I wore this one as a as a pendant, because that's probably the only use you could get out of it, should you be so bold. Again, from the Museum of Natural History collection. And mariolite is a known stone. It's been around for a while, and it's not as rare as some others. You can access this if you want to go looking for it. I've seen it in other gem listings, but it's not that bright, widely used. But the color is beautiful, and I think it's got enough hardness in it to be a durable enough stone to be worn. Again, thank you to Robin for this picture. And here we go. I managed to get a number of specimens of rhombohedral cleavages of this particular calcite that had been found on the floor of the jungle near the border of Bolivia. And what happened with this material was that within it there were twinning planes like the one that I had, and those twinning planes allowed, when you turned it the right way, to give a tremendous amount of refraction. So if you bring the twinning plane at the right angle up under the table of the stone you're cutting, and you cut it with that, all the back facets, all the side facets, if it's properly angled, will bring that refraction right through the table, as you can clearly see in this really well done photograph of calcite. But most cutters I know say, except for one I think it's Mr. Gray, who works with Coast to Coast Rare Gems, most cutters will tell you they will not touch a calcite because it's such a cursed stone to try and cut. So this is a high skill, you need a high skill cutter who knows what they're doing, just to even look at a stone this size, let alone cut it. And I think this is a magnificent stone. Now, the next stone from the collection I thought was very interesting, because cordierite, or also known as iolite, or water sapphire, generally speaking, is blue, and it has multiple colors in it. But rarely have I seen a red cordierite. This is from a new find, and it's so new that I didn't get a chance to get the location from Robin, but clearly a fun stone to get. And cordierite, if there's any amount of quantity or reserve in the location where this new find is, might be something you'd want to include, because excuse me, it's a beautiful stone when cut. Absolutely gorgeous stone. Now here's the dolomite that I just got back last year. It took me 3.5 years of waiting for Robert to get around to finishing it, because it was a big challenge. And this was the last and biggest piece of cuttable dolomite that I managed to find amongst the crystals that have been pulled over a 15-year period by a miner that I was working with from the Mount Brusiloff mine. And this is one of those situations where through sweat equity and a bit of good trading, I was able to get materials to cut. And from this came stones that went to Pala and the Smithsonian and so on around the world, that were cut from this material. And this is the only good location, a known location in North America for facetable dolomite. And this, I believe, is the largest ever cut from that material. It's close to flawless, 40.66 carats. It's the largest known cut dolomite from North America. And at the moment, in terms of accessibility, there are no locations that are still providing and mining and coming out of the mine on a regular basis of cuttable pieces of dolomite. So this is becoming an extremely hard stone to get a hold of. And I was very excited because this is the only colored piece of clear material that I found from probably 49 or 52 hours of sitting in the hot sun, going through about 3 tons of crystal pieces that have been accumulated by the miner. Now, one of the most beautiful minerals that came out of Mont Saint Hilaire, in my humble estimation, was Carltonite, and as a crystal, it's an exquisite color blue. I had not seen a cut one before. I saw this one from the ROM, but it's a fairly rare, hard to get stone, very hard to get decent crystals. And I would hesitate strongly because I love crystals almost as much or more than I do cut stones, to cut a fine crystal to create a stone that looks like this. So I'm hoping, above hope, that this was cut from a broken piece, simply because, above all, I'm a mineral collector. And I sort of make it my rule that I don't cut fine crystals. Again, this is another one of those super rare minerals from Mont Saint Hilaire to actually be cut. And thank you again for the ROM. Catherine Donnell, who's sort of run things over there, was kind enough to pull these pictures for me so that we could share them with you and you could see what really rare mineral gems look like. And here's one that the ROM is exceedingly proud of because it is the largest cut cerussite in the world at 898 carats. And here's a stone that if you hold it in your hand, its inability to transmit heat what could and would cause that stone possibly to explode from the tensions that were created in the stone from just being held. And this means that it's one of those stones that's very difficult to polish. It's easily cleaved, easily chipped, easily cracked, easily broken. And when you're dealing with stones that are large, very, very hard to do because the weight alone and the size make it very difficult to get perfect facets. And you add to that the difficulty of getting clean, sharp facets on a stone that is this soft. And I from what I've looked around, the minimum price per carat of a stone like this for a collector, should they be able to get any, is $100 a carat. I'm saying it's probably, and that's what happens when you get really large stones, that the dollar price per carat tends to drop. But when you get smaller, say 5 to 10 carat range of cerussite cut, it's actually far more per carat. So I'm an example of someone who's sort of fallen over the years into this little tiny niche of rare gem collecting. It's actually a millionaire's hobby. I've been a bit sneaky. I found ways and means of getting stones that in the end cost me nothing. But what I've done was I've very diligently searched amongst mineral dealers for broken crystals, fragments of new and rare minerals. And if I can get more than one, I'll get them cut. I'll sell one to an institution or another collector and hopefully garner enough money from the sale of the cut stone to pay for the rough and the cutting. And the cutting's never cheap because these stones really challenge the patience of even the most expert of cutters. So I'm going to share with you some of my secrets of and my contacts that I've developed for finding these stones and these uncut stones, so that if you want to try and access for your own selves some of these stones, these are areas you can, these are sources you can go to. So some of the rare gem dealers that I've bought from over the years, so I know they're trustworthy. Dr. Yaroslav Hirsel is an expert mineralogist and gemologist in Europe who's written many books on the subject of gems and minerals. And you'll see him, he does his own testing and everything, so he's very talented. He has good cutters, and I'm not sure whether he cuts them himself as well, but when you get a stone from him, you know it's been identified correctly. And that's one of the worries in the stones once that they've been cut, because it's very hard sometimes to do the testing on them after they're cut because of their soft and friable nature. Dudley Blowett is a very famous guy who used to go into Afghanistan and Pakistan. He went native. He was a small, diminutive man who was a runner and a mountain climber and a vegetarian, which was an interesting thing because most of the ethnic people that he dealt there were also vegetarian. And he dealt with the miners themselves, supplied them with dynamite so they wouldn't have to do everything by hand, which was difficult for them to acquire legally because the government did not want explosives getting in the hands of the terrorists. So he made a great number of good friends and was able to access a lot of very rare and beautiful and exciting, regular as well as rare mineral crystals. And because he has developed and trained and supplied good equipment to cutting shops in the Far East, he has got trained them to be able to cut these difficult to cut stones. And so he's a vertically integrated business that goes right from finding, collecting, and buying the rough all the way to marketing it. And I know he does over $1 million in every AGTA show. Not that that's secret information, but that gives credit to the popularity of rare gems and minerals in these days. When I see a lot of the regular dealers there struggling to make hundreds of thousands, when he's definitely killing it with the rare gems and minerals that he sells. So yeah, I think Dudley's in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And when I went to the conference last weekend, one of the guys was talking about what to do about shows, the value of going to shows and selling at shows. And he talked about positioning. And one of the examples he gave was Coast to Coast Rare Stones International, which is a group of only 3 cutters. There used to be more, but some of them have died. John Bradshaw, Michael Gray, and of course Brad Wilson, who has Alpine Gems in Ontario. They buy rough, they cut it, make it available to the collecting public. And if you go online, you can search out Coast to Coast Rare Stones, and they sell at close to a fair pseudo wholesale price for their cut. It's in US dollars, and they make it available. And you can buy stuff directly from Brad as well. So they are vertically integrated as well, and they're all good cutters. And the guy I mentioned earlier on, Michael Gray, is the world's preeminent cutter of calcites and very soft stones. And if you look at most of the big calcites that are out there, you'll find his name beside them as the cutter. And talented gem cutters. There are a few. One of the ones that I haven't purchased or worked with directly yet is Lisa Elser, who's based in the Vancouver area. And she's a very talented precision cutter. And if you want to get a good stone, you know the difference between a well-cut stone and a badly cut stone is the life and the color, and the value of the stone rises, I think, in direct relationship to the skill that's been put into the cutting of it. So people like Lisa are ones you want to try and look up if you want to buy the better quality stones that will sell much better. They're not native cut. I don't know if she recuts native cuts, but I would, if I were a cutter, that's what I would do. I would buy native cut stones that have good color and clarity and recut them so that they fit North American standards. And I've had the privilege of seeing some of the stones cut by Clement Schwarzinger, who's also been a speaker on our program numerous times from Linz, Austria, and he's an expert in tanzanites. Rudy and Ralph Obito from Stouffville, Ontario. I've known them. I actually knew their dad and worked with them from 40 years ago, and I've used them as cutters for a long time now. Very trustworthy, very good cutters. They're commercial cutters. They probably, as commercial cutters go, they may be the biggest in Canada. And their family of cutting heritage goes way back into Eder Oberstein. There's a young fella in Brett Karsnar, who's in Colorado, and he's actually really up to skills in cutting soft, as well as traditional stones and rare gems. And he shows in Tucson and Denver every year. They live near Denver. And of course, our own Brad Wilson in Kingston, a geologist and an excellent cutter and a wild man out there collecting in dangerous areas. And I'm sure anybody who knows him has heard the story about being in a tent in Baffin Island and a polar bear trying to snuffle and break into the tent and having to shoot it. So, I mean, that's the wild and woolly gem collector geologists are very uncommon in this world. And he's definitely one of the ones out there. He specializes in Canadian materials, but cuts internationally sourced material as well. So Brad doesn't do a lot of cutting for other people, but he definitely, he represents a good proportion of my own collection, because I bought a lot of stones from Brad, excellent cutter. And another cutter I bought from, although he's gone more private recently, is Jay Medici in Ohio. He's a private cutter, but of great talent. He's cut sulfur, for goodness sakes, from Maybe, Michigan, which is a very, very brittle stone and very, very hard to cut. In any world situation, I would I am in awe of his cutting skills. And he did it just to prove he could do it. And of course, another one of our talented speakers that we've had, Dr. Ari Akban of North York, but he's a specialist in synthetics and a very talented cutter. So, and of course, you can tell his bent because his email address is fascinating101 at gmail.com. It's a little hint there. Rare mineral dealers you can go to try and get uncut materials if you want of the rarer minerals. Brian Cosnar, Brett Cosnar's brother, actually, is a fair guy, and I really appreciate him for being a supplier of rare minerals. Yaroslav again, who also sells the rare minerals as well as doing his own identification, a reliable source for both rare minerals and gems. Gunnar Fabau of Germany, who does nothing but rare minerals, and he like Brett, like Brad at least, goes to the wild and woolly places of the world to find rare minerals and collects them himself. And you can find them in most of the major shows in Europe and the States. And Michael Shannon has been around. The Shannon family been around for a long time, and they provide rare minerals as well. You can always access him if you're looking for stuff. And Dudley Blount again, he spent most of his life, as I said earlier, in the wilds of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And of course, there are other places you can go to find rare minerals. Gemdat.org. I feel proud that I worked with Jolion, needling him to move from Mindat into the gem world. And I'm so glad he decided to do that years ago and create this incredible database on gems. Most museums which house natural history collections of minerals are very definitely worthwhile just to go and see and learn what some of these rare and unusual gem minerals look like when they're cut. Because oftentimes the best examples that are available are donated or bought and pop up in these mineral exhibits to show what the mineral and the cut stone look like. So well worth going to. And because of the growing interest in cut minerals in this end of the spectrum, we're seeing more and more literature out there on rare and unusual gems. And of course, those are the few of us out there that are collectors of rare gems and rare minerals. You can talk to us and we can try and help you. And of course, going to major gem and mineral shows, because hopefully, if it's a good show, there'll always be someone there that has rare minerals or rare gems and minerals for sale. And you can get to see them in the flesh. So my challenge to everyone is consider the tanzanite, the first popularized rare and exotic mineral gem. Maybe you could be the next Tiffany. Who knows? I mean, I've realized over the years that the guys that have the deepest pockets in terms of my gem clients are well and truly worth educating and actually value take your efforts to educate them, not only on the traditional gems, what's good and why it's good as an investor, because obviously if you're in the business for a while, you're selling pieces to these customers that are as expensive as a down payment on a house or a small car, clearly. And so they want to know and be educated on what's worth buying, why it is, and maybe, and I think the one thing I noticed the most is people who are educated want to buy, and even those that aren't, want to buy things that are unique, that no one else has, that are special only to them. And that's why I ended up getting into the custom jewelry business, because I got sick and tired of people looking at things I'd already made and saying, I like that, but could you tweak that? And I said, you know what, it's much better to make jewelry right from scratch and do it exactly the way the client wants it. And so I also want to make sure that they get things that no one else gets, and get something that's rarer than emeralds and rubies. For example, like the sphene we looked at earlier on, or a brilliant phenakite, and to educate the client base about these exciting and alternative stones. And this is an area that I think is worth our effort to learn about and expand into, because you'll be the only guy in the block, maybe the only guy in the city, the only girl in the city who's handling these stones and including them in jewelry and making them special and unique. Thank you. Hello, Jolion. think we lost him. Anyway, we need him to take off the muting so we can ask. Has anybody got any questions? Send them in on the chat if you have a question. Jolion. The scapolite in itself is not that common, Audrey. I'm just saying that it is a mineral that's out there, but the gem quality scapolites are actually quite rare. Any other questions? Put them up there. Thank you for your comments. Oh, you have a big chunk, Audrey? I can get you a cutter if you want. Just talk to me offline if you want. David from Calgary, I want to tell you that Jolion has recorded this whole program. It's just a matter of him finding the time to archive it. I'm asking him hopefully that we can get all these recent programs up and archived immediately. And we're slowly wanting to backtrack to find out, to get the other ones that have gone on in the past up and available. This is one of the problems is it's nonprofit and it's volunteer. So we're asking a lot of Jolion, but I'm hoping he can meet the challenge in the near future. We get more and more of these programs up and available. I think Jolion is having dinner. I wonder if you can hear us. Well, anyway, I want to thank you all, and I hope that you enjoyed the program. If there are any other questions, please put them up on chat, and I'll try and answer them verbally. And just a question to Audrey, is your big chunk clean and clear, or is it just a chunk? Oh, well, talk to me offline and I'll help you get it cut if you want. Thanks. Any other options or interested questions? Okay, well, thank you all for attending. And please make sure you sign up for the next meeting on synthetic diamonds and simulates, because I think it's going to be a really exciting program, especially considering the importance that synthetic diamonds are taking in their positioning on the jewelry market today. So I'm going to say adieu and hope you guys enjoyed the program. Thanks for your compliments and your feedback. Take care. There we are. I hear a voice. I thought I heard one.
Very good.
Who's speaking? I don't know. All right. I think you might be able to unmute yourself. You can give it a try if you want to speak.
Thank you, Ralph. David here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
What do we got there? Oh, Synolite.
Yeah, George Rossman speaking with the Synolite. That's sort of the gem quality stuff I get to work with for scientific studies.
Oh, hell, that's a nice one. So, George, what's the color range you've seen in Synolite? I've only seen shades of yellow and brownish, sort of.
I've also only seen the brown. It's due to the iron +2 content. It's a member of the olivine family of structures, and it's coming from the ferrous iron, which mostly absorbs in the infrared, very little impact on the visible portion of the spectrum.
You got any others you want to share with us while we're those few of us that are still around?
Well, I can dig out a few, I think. Stand by.
I am. This is like the after show.
Oh, the after show is always fun. Let's see what I have here. Oh, I know what I can show you.
By way of introduction, George is one of the world's leading experts on color in minerals and gems.
Oh, thank you, sir. Let's just see what I have here. Share the screen on some diaspore. This is the Turkish diaspore showing you the anisotropy of the color.
Yeah. Well, you saw one that I had cut.
It was beautiful.
That belonged to Steve. It still belongs to Stephen Kalowski's estate.
Yeah.
And that one's for sale, even though we're non-commercial. I'll throw that in there because the widow certainly needs the money.
Okay. And just for the fun of it, here's kind of the availability of tugtupite that one can get. It's not really gemmy, but these are the interesting quality specimens.
Yeah, and that one will for us like crazy.
Oh, it's spectacular.
Yeah. And isn't there a phosphorescence or a luminescence that follows the exposure?
There's, yeah, a short live, very weak, not particularly pronounced in my samples.
Yeah. I know people that actually get to collect that multiple times a year there,
Wow.
but they're almost all academics.
Nothing wrong with them.
No, nothing wrong. He says modestly.
And do you know what the rarest of all gems is?
Well, there have been a number that have held that title. Painite was one for a while.
At one time, I owned 2/7 of the entire world supply of painite.
Oh yeah, but
I found in a locality.
They found a new location that has far more availability, so it sort of dropped off the top.
Right, it's all mined out basically now. The local miners are not mining it anymore. When we did the work on the material, we found the inclusions in the painite. We gave it to the Burmese, and within 2 weeks, they discovered the actual outcrop of the painite.
Oh, did they?
Mhm.
Yeah. When I was in Maguk, I managed to get some rough pieces that I've had, and I got a cut one.
The cut ones are very rare still.
Yep. They're a pain.
They are a pain.
Are you showing us a picture of painite here, or are you just talking about it?
I'm trying to get you something even more rare than painite, if I can find my picture. Here it is, 1921. Where is it? 1920. Been so long since I've done this, I've forgotten what it is. I got to find the picture, beautiful picture of one of the world's rarest minerals.
The anticipation is killing us.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing. I'm not able to find it immediately.
Oh no.
But I will be there very shortly with that. As soon as I get all my publications, I can then search for the name of this very rare mineral.
What a salesman.
Yeah, you just got to stand with it, folks. Too many things. I got too many things, sir.
From a jewelry standpoint, a gem standpoint, it was kind of cool at the conference to meet Mark Cullinan, the grandson of the Cullinan family. And I think the family still has an interest in the Premier mine. So. I was telling him I've got a diamond in matrix from the mirror pipe in Russia and one from China, which is really hard to get. But I still, to this date, have not been able to get one from Canada or South Africa. And I really like to fill out that spectrum. And someday someone's going to say, "Oh, hey, Ray, I've got this specimen. Do you want to trade for it or buy it?" And then that'll be my happy day.
Here it is. Okay,
Oh,
I found it.
At last.
2017. And share the screen. And here we are. Chauthuite.
Oh, really? Now that's one I haven't heard of.
This is some work that Tony Kampf, myself, and Shima at Caltech did. It was found in Myanmar. It was originally thought it was scheelite, but one of the local gemologists realized it wasn't scheelite. He sent it to the US for us to study. This is the only known example of this mineral, not of the gem. It's the only known example of the mineral.
Really? So it's like a lot of minerals, you have a type specimen and then boom, boom, you can't find anymore.
That's right.
Well, that's kind of cool. Can you send me that picture?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, just if you'll attach it to an email, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, there's a
I
whole
just wanna-
article published on it. It's a bismuth antimony oxide from Mogok, Myanmar.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people realize how big Mogok is. It's not, they think it's a singular mine location, but we spent weeks going around Mogok.
It's really a fascinating place.
It really is. But a very dangerous place right now.
Oh my gosh, yes. 8 miles from the hotel I stayed at, there was a bombing literally 4 days ago,
Where did
Killing-
you stay?
killing about 50 some people and injuring hundreds.
Where are we staying?
In Pakant in the Jade Country.
Oh, did you ever get to see the jade mine? Because everybody told me we were going to go there, but it's still, I've been told that recently that it's still buried and unstable location geologically.
Yeah, I've spent about a week in Pakant. I visited the jade mines,
You did?
several of them. Yeah,
Wow.
got into some of the underground areas and a lot of it was, everything was under military control. When you go to the mine, you spend an hour talking with the military commander, drinking kind of a fake orange soda before they let you really look into the area. And the thing that was most distressing to me was when I got to the mines, the absolute rule was I couldn't collect anything.
Yep. And you know why, don't you?
Tell me, oh, they wanted to send it back to Mandalay first to be taxed and evaluated.
Yeah, exactly. Because the government taxes every single gem that comes out.
Yep.
That's how they look upon that as their source of income. They don't want you, Mr. White guy from another country, taking away their source of income. So all the miners there were very cautious not to show us too much stuff because they didn't want any leaking out what they had because they knew they'd be taxed on it. But I actually have 2 cool things from there. I don't know if you've got any of them, but I got 2 quarter carat crystals of diamond.
Oh, wow. No,
They only come from one pit.
amazing. I got at the very end, before we left the night I was going to leave, the head military commander of the area knocked on my door and brought in a little box and said a present for the American. And it was a box with about 7 or 8 pieces of lavender jade, which is what I was
Really?
particularly interested in getting. We had to take it back to Yangon and take it to an appraiser to be evaluated. Then we had to pay tax on it. We had to pay tax on the jade. We had to pay a separate tax on any faceted gem and a separate tax on any of the minerals.
Yep.
And to do that, I had to go to the bank and they wouldn't take my Burmese currency. They demanded I deposit more American money in order to get a checking account to pay the tax.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. And then I had all these stones, a suitcase full of stones and pockets full of stones, and the various documents of the appraisals and the taxes that were paid. When I got to the airport, nobody checked anything. I just walked
Yep.
right through with not a single check.
Well, when we were there, some people had hid stuff in their luggage and they were x-raying the heck out of every piece of luggage. And before we went to great lengths to get permissions so we could export what we found we gathered, and not one of them was allowed to take out anything, although I managed to sneak out a couple of little tiny things in my pockets. But we had to ship them through someone who still had a shipping license through Hong Kong, and then pay that shipping from Hong Kong back to our home location.
Okay. Now here's another rare one for you.
Oh, are you kidding? Another one I don't know about? You're killing
You got
me.
it.
Is this one got any other availability, or is this the only one?
I think there might be 2, but possibly this is the only one.
Oh, Nathan Renfro, I've dealt with him.
Yeah, he's a micro
The GIA.
person. GIA, right.
Yeah.
And John Koivula, of course, was their person that did the microscopy for many years, and it was after him that it was named.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So
So
you're
that's
pulling
John Koivula right there.
you're pulling them out of your back pocket and stuff I've never heard of, but then you're in a unique place to find out about these things.
Oh, well, I have fun in life. What can I say?
Yeah, some people are lucky.
Oh, yes.
Is that it, or are we done?
Oh, that's enough for now. I got a lot of other
Ah,
things, but
you're just a big tease, George.
I like the tease. It's fun. Come on, man. Actually, I make my life by the offcuts and the broken things. People like Mike Gray in particular have been extremely generous to me, sending me the offcuts or the pieces that have fractured and are not suitable for gems. And that becomes the food of my science.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Anyway, thank you for your contributions at the end of everything, and thank everybody for hanging around to catch the after show. And I guess at some point, Jolian's going to come back and turn it all off. So, ciao. See you next month. If you have an interest at all in this field, I think you'll find it extremely interesting. And we do have a guy that I'm not using as a speaker, but he's in a factory in Russia making synthetic diamonds, and he's going to be an observer and will also make some comments at the end. So I think it's going to be a truly interesting program. So thank you all. Ciao for everything. And I'm going to end my part of this. And
Thank
I
you
hope
so
that-
much, Ray and George, for all your beautiful pictures and your insights.
Thanks, David.
Mhm.
And I'm just saying there's a future for these rare mineral gems. And I'm hoping that one of you is going to take up the chalice and run with it and become the new Tiffany with one of these stones.